Great. Well, hello. Welcome to the next session with myself, Russ Cantwell. I've been at SHI here about 10 years, and I lead our strategic technology office, and I'm joined by my friend from Dell here, Mr. Max Stemple. Max, you want to tell him a little bit about what you do?
Sure, absolutely. I am a cloud strategist on Dell's global technology office. I do a lot of consulting, a lot of cloud workshops, automation, transformation with Dell with some of our largest accounts. And so I keep track of what industry trends are and where people are moving to and try and share that information.
Try and share it.
Yeah.
Professional orders, we like to say at times. The conversation we're going to have today is a little interesting in that the flow of it might be slightly out of context, and it's on purpose. So if it feels disjointed, just know that we're really trying to figure out, in some respects, some feedback of where people are, or if other people are seeing this trend that we've noticed as we talk through today. I actually came to this conclusion on my own and then identified, so speaking with Max, that Dell had ended up in the same spot, which is why we've actually been going on tour a little bit talking about this discussion. So the very first thing that we want to do today is we want to get a Slido up here to participate. I know you've probably done several of these as you've gone throughout. I also recognize that there's not a whole lot of context for you answering a question about where you are on this journey because I have not outlined the journey for you. I will do that here right after you answer it, but I first kind of want to see where all of your answers lie as to where is your organization today in your infrastructure journey. So we're talking a little bit about the way your infrastructure is architected, consumed, managed. You could argue the way you've purchased it. We'll talk a little bit about that later today as well, because we're going to talk today about some variables that we see that are affecting people's decision making on infrastructure purchases, as well as design. And I'm a very big fan of history, so I'm going to go through a little bit of a history lesson that we've seen in infrastructure over time and what that's leading to in the trends today. So looking at the answers here, Max, you're going to have to help me remember these as we flow into our workflow here.
Well, 64% right now are traditionally three-tier versus hyper-converged infrastructure.
You know, this, we have a mix of everything, and I'm not sure what to call it. I love that that's one of the answers that we have popping up there. So this is advantageous, I think, for our conversation because it directly aligns to probably what we see a lot of the time. So y'all can keep answering, but this is pretty much giving me exactly what I need to know as I walk into what we're going to do for the history lesson here. So before I do that, after I go through the context of the history of infrastructure design and show you the trend that I believe that we have identified, legal makes me put this up because I'm going to start talking about finance at some point in time in this presentation. But we are not accountants. This is not tax advice. I formerly worked at Ernst & Young, or EY as people know it now, but I'm still not an accountant. So this is us stating that while we are going to go over some of these things that might be interesting for you to talk about with your finance department, we are not giving any form of advice related to this, or not. It's more informative than anything. So the very first thing that we do, I'm a very big fan of Back to the Future. You'll see a couple references here. This one, a quote from Doc Brown, even if your intentions are good, it can backfire drastically. And for some of the voting that you saw there, I think we'll see that some of our decisions in infrastructure over time have been well-intentioned but have backfired, and we've tried to counteract them a few different times. So on your far left, you'll see we're starting in kind of the 60s with the mainframe. Technically, this started in 1947, but I'm guessing that version of a mainframe no one really operated at any point in time. In the 60s, many of those actually still exist and live today. Interestingly enough, with the mainframe, this is a highly centralized piece of equipment. But I would argue, factually, but I'm welcome to be challenged on it if you guys want to ask questions, it's the most efficient piece of equipment we've ever had. LPARs ran at 100% utilization in all scenarios. I actually used to work on these regularly. I used to write code to translate COBOL into x86 code with a persistent compiler, and I was wowed by the efficiency in the use of mainframes. Problem was highly rigid, not flexible. In the 80s, we started seeing a significant amount of client server and distributed computing, and that led us to the distributed client server framework that really popularized in the 90s. We started doing things like externalizing storage. Later in this time frame, VMware came out. In 2002, GSX becomes ESXi. We virtualize infrastructure. Why are we doing that? We're chasing that efficiency of the mainframe, which becomes a theme that we're doing here, but we wanted the flexibility of distributed computing. So we started centralized, and then we broke things out. We do this over and over and over again. The complexity caused by breaking things out into a distributed model led us to trying to shrink and centralize it again in a converged model. Companies like VCE came out with the vBlock. You had flex pods. You have all sorts of reference architectures. The intent here was to package everything into a full stack solution that you could life cycle manage through something called an RCM, a Release Candidate Manager. I actually used to go out and do RCM upgrades. The cost would be about $50,000 you would pay to ensure going from one known good state to the next. Only we didn't always achieve that. There were levels of automation in this time frame that weren't successful because we hadn't successfully virtualized every aspect of the stack. So people really moved back to where 70% of you are still today, based on the question that we got before this. And over time, you could argue HP left hand really virtualized storage well for the first time, but we didn't get this to true enterprise ready at scale until we got to vSAN 6.2 in the 2016-ish timeframe. You saw HCI really with VMware in a much more mature Nutanix at that time, partnered with Dell heavily at that time. That what's new, what's old is new again, kind of comes back around. They come in and this starts to popularize. So this is now virtualized the full stack because storage has been virtualized and we can fully automatically lifecycle manage the full stack the way we wanted to in 2009 with Converged, a fully realized dream later on in 2016. And this was the last major shift we had, or catalyst, to something truly changing the infrastructure consumption model on premises. And it's one that it looked like, I don't know, 15 to 20% was roughly where we were at of people have gone down. I'm willing to bet some of you have struggles with HCI. An oversubscription of a resource or two, something like compute or storage, something got oversubscribed. What we're seeing now is people moving back to disaggregation for the efficiency of the financial aspect. I can scale compute resources differently, independent of one another, but now the principles from HCI's lifecycle management capabilities are being applied to the disaggregation, and companies like Dell are actually investing very heavily in this concept, and that's really what we're wanting to talk about today. And Max, I wanted to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about, we've seen VMware invest in this, we've seen announcements of Nutanix accepting external storage like PowerFlex and soon to be PowerStore. What is Dell doing?
Microsoft too.
Microsoft too.
Yep.
How did y'all arrive at this sort of concept independently of us doing this?
Yeah, it's completely customer driven. As I had mentioned, I talk with a lot of customers, travel all over the world, figure out what's working, what's not working. And so our strategy going forward is really around the disaggregated approach. A lot of the things that you've heard today have been around AI, right? There's a lot of analysis paralysis around AI. We all know we need GPUs. We need a lot of compute, but what are those use cases that are really going to deliver the value back to the business? In addition to that, you know, with the big, I got to be careful here, acquisition of a hypervisor platform from one company to another, this has also created a metric ton of analysis paralysis around what do we use for a hypervisor? What do we use for a container distribution? Do I run 3-4 different POCs to see what works and what doesn't work? And what the interesting thing that we found out is that the hypervisor is somewhat irrelevant as it relates to long-term strategy that will sustain in perpetuity. What is sticky about a hypervisor is the automation, the orchestration, right? NCM, NCP for Nutanix, VCF, SDDC, ARIA for VMware, so on and so forth. And so what we're seeing from a disaggregated infrastructure approach is that customers, you, want purpose-built or commodity compute disaggregated storage, where we have the flexibility to pivot or the agility to pivot between runtimes anytime we want. We don't want proprietary software on proprietary hardware because we get stuck. And I thought it was really interesting that the poll results came back 67 some odd percent 3-tier. I think there's a lot of smart people in the room that may have predicted what was about to happen, right? And so at the end of the day, if we are purpose-built or commodity compute, and we can change the persona of that compute, and we're on 3-tier, right, or disaggregated storage, so we don't have to worry about, over or under subscribing resources, and we can run multiple runtimes all at the same time. We have the ability to have extensibility to the public cloud or to colo facilities, et cetera. And we just have that agility to change our mind because change is inevitable. And that's really, really important to our customers. And they're all moving in this direction with the idea of automation and orchestration to back it all up, right? API plugins, SDKs, webhooks, so I can have an ecosystem cloud environment where the runtime, the hypervisor, is not so important anymore. And so one of the other big advantages of it is we're using commodity, purpose-built compute. In Dell's world, that would be PowerEdge, right? 1/5 the cost of an HCI appliance, right? And I can run any runtime on it. Now I also have the disaggregated storage. And so what we're seeing, I'll end with this, Russ, about 60% less cost of hyper-converged infrastructure on disaggregated infrastructure, but all of the advantages of full lifecycle management across the entire system, no matter where the infrastructure is. So cost.
Yeah.
40% of the cost of HCI. That's a big thing from ROI TCO perspective.
And probably not surprising for the people who've stayed on it, because that costing factor is a thing that we've always known. People ended up buying HCI more often than not for operational benefits, especially smaller shops. Super common. It's also a good sort of segue into our next bit and topic. But I will also tell you very quickly, the ability to make a change is something that I view very passionately as IT's currency. It is your financial leverage. I think most of you intrinsically know this, probably haven't thought about it directly as often. But when I worked in mergers and acquisitions, it was very common that the ability for an IT department to make a change very directly affected the valuation difference in the business. This is true also in negotiations. The automation that is being described here allows not only for lifecycle management, but decommission and reprovision onto different, say, hypervisors, container platforms, abstraction layers. You're hearing it called runtimes here. That is an element of financial leverage that most people don't think about, but it is directly how technical decisions affect that financial leverage. And going into that, so just to be clear, not a political statement here, but very interesting information. I said I would talk about finances, and we have an interestingly worded big, beautiful bill name that came out of this. But I was listening to a podcast, and I have a financial background, and someone mentioned something to me about some tax changes that had been codified into law. And it really got me excited. I paused the podcast, started digging into it, but I realized we need to keep it light here, so I had to keep with the Back to the Future theme. Doc, you don't just walk into a store and buy plutonium. This is Marty McFly warning about reckless acts. I recognize what I'm going into right now is fully a reckless act, but I find it wildly important. And before I go into it further, I basically want to know, do people even know about changes in the Big Beautiful Bill to the way capital assets are treated and that could impact your business? To be clear, so far, I've done this in front of 30 or 40 different customer executives, and the only ones who knew about it worked at accounting firms. So not super common. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Wait, there are new tax incentives. And by the way, this second one here, which is great, need to talk to CFO or finance team. If I did make a recommendation, it is y'all should check me on this, because finances, tax, and accounting are all in the eye of the beholder. For nonprofits, as an example, through this process, I've learned that these will not be valuable for those entities because they already have other tax incentives that make them exempt from this process. So interesting things we've learned that will be independent to your individual teams, but we'll go through it right now. It seems most don't know, or very wisely will just want to check with the CFO, which you should do after this regardless. So the first thing here is, this is an actual snippet from the Big Beautiful Bill. I spent hours scouring this thing because AI really didn't help me very much in getting this. I didn't want to give you an AI overview. I wanted to find the actual place in the bill. And finding the exact verbiage to Control F find in a very large bill didn't work very well either. So this is you guys paying me back for my time spent finding this, as you listening to this particular part of the presentation. You don't need to know or read this particular piece. However, all you need to know is there are two sections in here. One of them, it encourages capital investment by accruing a 100% first-year depreciation on the purchase. I already had a customer, I think y'all probably just talked about AI in the last session. I saw Lee up here. The customer working on a $10 million AI hardware-related project right now solely because of the existence of this bill. They would not have done it otherwise. They're a customer in the DFW area. I know them very well. I used to work with them. And so we're already seeing the effects of this. It's very, very important. It basically puts into place some rules that were in 2017 that went away over time. I'll show you some more evidence of that in a moment. And then the other piece is more recent. 2022 R&D expenses could no longer be realized their full tax benefit in that year. So think of like software developer salaries and things like that. They had to be amortized over 5 years. Really affected startups or heavy software development shops. So the changes we're seeing are one, the bonus depreciation that I just talked about. More interestingly enough, in this one, you can't see it down there, but it said in 2017, these rules were changed. And when they changed in 2017, they were meant to expire over time. So it used to be you'd get 100% tax depreciation or bonus depreciation on the asset for a qualifying asset, which is typically something that's under 20 years in its asset lifespan. That's basically everything that we do. You do that, and you could get it back in 2017. But starting in like 22 or 23, it went down 20% year over year until it eventually got all the way down to nothing. That was problematic, created a lot of uncertainty. In addition to that, there was the R&D one that I mentioned earlier. So once again, this is on software developer pieces. Now there is one for foreign R&D. That is still something that you have to work through over 15 years, I think it is. It says it there. So this is more for domestic R&D investment. But the intent here, of course, from the government's perspective is to encourage manufacturing and AI investment. But for us, we can benefit from this because it helps us manage more appropriately our capital outlay. So the reason why I say and show you all of this is because these are variables that are encouraging building again. These are things that changed over time, over the last 10 years collectively, or 8 years, I guess, total. They have made it to where it's been uncertain for doing capital purchases, and during that time frame, we even had other things that changed. FASB accounting standards made the dollar buyout lease untenable. So what's happened? Over those last few years, we've had consumption models like Dell Apex, right, that have come and matured. So whether or not this is interesting to you, or you just don't care about CapEx because your company doesn't care about it, very well could be the case. We have very mature financial models that were meant to combat some of this madness that existed for the last several years, where you can do consumption models with them. So you have different options of building and consuming, in addition to the fact that we have these new automation platforms like DAP, Dell Automation Platform, to drive the disaggregation that 70% of you are using today, but you have an opportunity to build around getting that full life cycle management to take you from one known good state to the next known good state, or decom, reprovision, and stick to having more financial leverage and negotiation going forward. I know people have probably dealt with some changes over the last 2 years due to market forces, some acquisitions that were made. These are the types of things that are being done in response to the fact that customers have had no leverage, and I think it's going to be very powerful. So those are the trends and the aspects where I'm willing to, we have 7 minutes to open this up for questions. I will tell you, Max and I can fill 7 minutes unbelievably easily if you want us to keep talking.
True story.
But I already went over my time limit there. I wanted to do this in 15, in order to get to some questions. So does anyone have questions or even want to challenge the notion of this idea of the disaggregation being sort of a new theme? I'll add one other piece while you're thinking of questions. Oh, we have one.
How you doing, Dr. Alvin?
Thank you, sir.
What I'm looking at is campus area networks to network area network. My question to you is,
Dr. Alvanupia, Raleigh, North Carolina. My question to you is, when I'm looking at it from a mechanical engineering, smart city development perspective, and we're looking at aggregation to where the real estate was impacted by people working from home, and the models themselves where they were aggregated, kind of like the old client-server, federated versus client-server model or distributed. How are you seeing what you're presenting to us as a direct impact on the last mile as it relates to the edge? Because we own a telco tower, and what we've seen is people are trying to put data centers beside the telco tower because they don't have that last edge advantage. So can you speak to that as we move to neighborhood area networks, which are more micro versus what we're used to right now?
Give me
I think he understands my question,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
I think I do.
If you want
me to take a stab at it?
Go for it, and I will have thoughts
Okay.
after certainly.
So you had brought up Dell Automation Platform. Really quickly, to give you, there's 3 silos under it. There's Dell Private Cloud, which consists of the runtimes, the container distributions, curated outcomes. You click a button, you have full LCM on that commodity hardware. We also have AI outcomes. So think about digital assistants, digital twins, visualizations, smart cities, AI agentic RAG models, or even AI code generation. Blueprints already created. You click them, deploy them to this commodity disaggregated infrastructure, and you're delivering value back into the business faster. The third silo is our native edge platform. And that is fascinating because a lot of the data is being pulled in at the edge, right? And so people are putting those data centers next to the edge so that they can parse the data or they can run AI versus the data. So what we're seeing a lot of people do is put these devices out at the edge and do the actual processing, the analytics, send the resultant data, right, back to their data lakehouse for real analysis, right? You'll save a lot of money, a lot less network bandwidth, et cetera, if you can do a lot of that at the edge. And so the third silo behind Dell Automation Platform is our native edge platform. Same thing, fully lifecycle management, automated, orchestrated, one single console to, we have customers with 800 distribution centers that they're managing everything. We have a lot of cities that are doing smart cities with it as well. But we're doing the analysis, we're doing the capturing of data there, we're parsing it there, and then we're sending it back to our data lake houses, right?
something as specific is what I like about Dell is what Dell did with Red Hat.
Yep.
Look at it from an ORAN perspective. I'm more looking at it as a server, how that coagulates. Because back in the day when we went to the wire mesh network, these type of things were not available.
Right.
And so as we look at what your typical telco provider is going to be versus your CSP, looking at the ORAN environment, how are you integrating what ORAN could be looked at as non-traditional
Right.
from a Red Hat perspective?
Right.
And Dell telco side can be looked at as traditional, but the reality is I'm a mechanical engineer. So if I have 10,000 devices that I need to talk to, I need to see what the float switch is. I can't have 10,000 people go at the same time.
Right.
I need it to send me a signal back to my server so that I can deploy my resources.
Right.
But if I have that cluster at the edge, that delay hour, it costs us $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's the perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of times I see people shy away from communication regarding ORAN, but it's not going anywhere.
Right.
Even though some of the larger telcos, other than AT&T, have really not embraced the ORAN technology.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And it really depends on the use case and what we're trying to do, right? And that at scale capacity, obviously, that's, you know, the route to go, yeah. But for, you know, not everybody is as large or has as much going on. So, but yeah, to that point, the native edge is it's a no-cost hypervisor. You don't pay for the hypervisor. You get all the automation, the orchestration. You can put it out at the edge at any location you want. And then have full life cycle management, et cetera. Huge cost savings over any other methodology out at the edge.
It was a phenomenal question. I don't know if we paid him or what.
Yep.
It was because there's more trends. I have 1 minute and 20 seconds, so if we have other questions, I want to get to them. But that trend of disaggregating and distributing things, it actually goes much wider than you think. We actually, all of the things you said, we originally centralized into data lakes. You said data lake houses now. That's a distribution model. It connects to all of those different bits and pieces. So with our last minute here, I'll open it up for any more questions that we might have. Also open to disagreements and challenges, mostly with Max. No? If we have nothing else, I will ask Max an impromptu and unplanned exit. If you had one thing to look forward to related to this topic in 2026 for everyone, what would you close with and let them know?
Your cloud, your terms. And I hate to use the word cloud, Russ, because what are we talking about? Private cloud, we're talking about hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, ecosystem cloud, et cetera. At the end of the day, I'm excited about the fact that the power now is being given back to the consumer, to the customer, especially with the disaggregated approach, that they have the ability to switch runtimes, to create their ecosystem, even including the edge, their ecosystem cloud environment that spans their core data centers out to the colos, out to the edge, into the hyperscalers on their terms, right? And make intelligent decisions around data and workload placement. That's what I'm most excited about.
Perfect. Our time is up. I'll just leave you with, go talk to your finance department about the changes to the big, beautiful bill, see if they're applicable to you. And if you want to talk about any of this further, reach out to your SHI account representative or any one of us to see you around here. Thank you.
Thank you.